Right. Hello, top three. We're here today with Chief Master Sergeant Farrill. I'm Master Sergeant Campesano. We're both working with the IG right now. Chief Farrill just got out here from the 372nd training group. How about recruiting group? And so he's been here since about January, and working for the IG team. And so we just thought we'd pick his brain a little bit today and share some of that information with you. So to start off with, Chief, what is one thing you wish all AFRS leaders knew that could help them be more effective leaders?
Well, I don't know that it's just one thing to know, but it's important to know for leading airmen is getting out from behind your desk and going to the field. We talk about it a lot in PME, and I'll probably mention that again later as we talk. But it's actually just getting out in the field, knowing your airmen, knowing your people, planning and time management. A lot of us try to or link that in with production, and it is a production tool, but it also relates to the family and taking care of your family and things like that. So I don't know, like I said, if it's just one thing, but sometimes the common sense things, we get so wrapped up in our day-to-day life and running 150 miles an hour that we forget the basics sometimes. So getting out from behind your desk, going out, and then also, I said it wasn't one thing, it's not about you anymore as a leader. A lot of us have trouble accepting that fact. All the decorations, awards, everything that we earned as an individual, now we're charged with getting our airmen there to replace us, and it's about the team and about our airmen and building a solid foundation.
Okay. So if someone's really wanting to become a better leader, maybe they don't really have any supervision experience prior to being a recruiter, and now they're getting into that flight chief role or MLS or something like that. How would you suggest they grow themselves as a leader? What kind of things can they do to get better at it?
Well, that's actually, that happened to me. I made Master Sergeant on the bag as a recruiter. Actually, I sewed on Master my second year in recruiting as a recruiter. Before I came into recruiting, I was a security forces instructor. So I was used to running, 180 to 120 airmen every cycle, every class that we had, and supervising, so to speak. But not when it comes to EPRs and decorations and feedback, ACA, stuff like that. So I was actually in that position, and as it may sound funny, but I went back to PME. What does the Air Force say I should be doing? And that's what I try to do. And we built a good team out there. Feedback is enormous. It was called feedback then. Now it's called ACA. It's feedback. Having that face-to-face, setting those expectations of what you expect of your airmen. We have to do it. Otherwise, our airmen don't know what to expect. They don't know what their roles and responsibilities are. So we have to, like I said before, we have to get to know our airmen. We have to do the things that the Air Force has taught us to do through all of our levels of PME. And that feedback is the most important thing. And honestly, I feel like it saved me as a young flight chief, just sewed on or had on Master for a year or so. Really hadn't had to supervise before that in that aspect and actually grow airmen. Setting those expectations on feedback, not 1484 feedback, not daily conversation feedback, actual feedback whenever you go through it with the airmen. So that's what I would lean on as somebody coming in who maybe hasn't had to supervise like that, and then trusting the core values, trusting the enlisted force structure that lays out our roles and responsibilities, not just for our airmen but for us. So that's as basic as that sounds. That's what got me through it. So, and my airmen respected it and loved it. So.
Okay. Well, so the next question is a big topic in the Air Force, especially these last couple of weeks, is always trying to reduce our suicide rates. And right now, we've been asked to reflect on what we can all be doing to help each other and get those numbers down. Is there anything that you would like to add to that conversation?
It's a tough it's a tough one to talk about, but we have to as leaders talk about it. And one is too many. Uh, we have our pause that Chief Wright has and the Air Force has put down on us, which I think is a positive. But we have to do it right. I don't think one day is going to do it. I think it needs to become a culture. I would always worry as a pro suit is really where I really started worrying about it. As a flight chief, your recruiters are typically closer to you, and you can reach out and make contact with them and check on them and things like that. But I never wanted that to be something I had to go through. So I took it, me and my commander and our leadership team, we took it to a level to where going to the field, it's easy to send an email, it's easy to call. Those things are easy to do, and they should be done. And sometimes they have to be done, that's what we're left with. But just going to the field, not just to do an office visit, not just to get a zone briefing, go to the field, get to know your people, shake their hands, tell them what their contribution is. Whether that's if we want to talk on the production side, whether it's maybe somebody fell one short that month of making goal, but they put two people in. Without those two people, just shaking their hands and thanking them for their contribution, getting to know their family as best you can. I know when I would go to the field as a pro suit, just to do visits, not necessarily training or anything like that, but just to go see folks, I would want to have lunch or dinner with not just the airmen, but the family. I would want to get to know them, and a lot of times that's what it takes, is getting to know your people, and then you start to see you can see changes in people sometimes. It's very the suicide thing is like I said before, one too many. But we have to get in front of it, and one day is not going to do it. Those resiliency days that we call them when we get together and do a barbecue or something like that, we should be doing that stuff anyways as leaders. It shouldn't always be work, because folks get burned out. So we have to get out there. We have to get to know our people, and a resiliency day is good. But one resiliency day is not going to solve the problem. We have to make this a culture of taking care of airmen. There is a way to hold people accountable, be accountable yourself, and take care of airmen. There is a such thing as high morale and high production in recruiting service. And it's up to us as leaders to find that mix and put it together and take care of our airmen.
So. All right, thank you. So this one's a little more personal. What made you decide to become a recruiter way back when? What year was that?
It was like 2002, 2004.
But then once you were a recruiter, obviously you stayed. So what then drove your decision to stay? Because back when you joined, it was a volunteer.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So why did I join recruiting first?
Yes.
So I was a cop before, and no, I was not running from the cop career field. I love the career field. I still love the career field. What? We got some theme music going.
Oh, that's our conference call line. There we go. Sorry about that.
So why I came into recruiting?
Yes.
I was a tech sergeant at Security Forces Academy there at Lackland, and my Code 50 was going to expire. I knew that it was coming up, going to expire, and I knew that I was going to be moving regardless. And my thought process, I was already thinking about either doing recruiter or TI or something special duty to kind of broaden my breadth of experience a little bit. I was a young tech sergeant, and I wanted to have some sort of control. I felt like if I just went back to the cop career field, the jobs that I would be doing were jobs that I'd already done at multiple bases. So I knew that I wanted to do more. So I saw special duty as an opportunity, and I didn't act on it initially. I was taking a college class right there at Lackland. I think it was in the same building as the recruiting school in the evening. And there was, I'm not gonna say she was old, but there was an older lady, older than me at the time, was sitting beside me in the class. We're all in civilian clothes, and it turned out she was the commandant of the recruiting school. And she started asking me probing questions, which I know are probing questions now about what I wanted to do. And I had mentioned that I thought about being recruiting. I still didn't know that she was the commandant of the recruiting school. So I got recruited into recruiting. Me and my wife had already talked about it. I went home and told my wife, and that's the way it worked out. Didn't really care where I went. We just wanted to see a different part of the country. That's why we went up to the Northeast. So why did I stay in recruiting? If you would have asked me that, and I was asked that question within probably my first 8 months in recruiting, 6 to 8 months, I was in a class, PSS, which was our sales force then, we were doing a refresher class. And the instructor at the group asked me, he asked the whole group, who's returning to force? That was the question. Who is going to return to force whenever the time comes? And I raised my hand. There's no way I was staying in recruiting. Early on, I missed goal the first month I was on the bag as a recruiter, so I had to figure some things out. But there was no way. I felt like I went from, like most of our recruiters probably feel, I felt like I went from being in charge with tech school students to being on an island, to where I was the airman, I was the A1C. So initially, I wasn't going to stay in recruiting. As I went through that first year, things got better. Planning and time management clicked for me, which we're probably going to talk about at some point here. And I started working my business, and things started going right. Like I said, I made master my second year on the bag as a recruiter, and my flight chief started vectoring me for flight chief duty. So I'm one of those guys that went straight from EA recruiter to flight chief. There's pros and cons with that, but I started getting vectored that way. I wasn't really paying too much attention to it because I was still concerned about myself and recruiting and taking care of my mission. But I changed my mind, and I decided to stay in recruiting. I knew I was being vectored for a flight chief position, and I decided to stay. And obviously here I am.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So if there's something that flight chiefs could say to their recruiters to help motivate them and keep them on track, what do you think that would be?
I don't know if you can say one thing. I used to say this saying that I think I heard on ESPN at one point. So it was, when all is said and done, more is said than done. So I feel like we have to be the doers. We have to go out and we have to do things like demonstration performance. We can't expect our recruiters, although they are taught very well at the recruiting school, the basics of being a recruiter. We can't expect them to know exactly how to set up and do a school visit, for example. It takes us as the leaders, the flight chiefs, even the pro suits, to go out to the field and do some demonstration performance, train our people. Just like in any other AFSC, we sell it as recruiters, on the job training. We're going to show you, somebody's going to show you how to do the job. They're going to help you do the job, then they're going to watch you do the job. We should be no different. So we have to go to the field. It's like I said when we started, it's easy to send emails. It's easy to make phone calls. We have to get off our backside and go to the field and show our airmen what we expect of them, how to do it, demonstration performance, pie charts, Excel spreadsheets. That's not going to make you a good leader. You have to go to the field, and you have to get to know your people, and you have to show them what your expectations are. So,
okay.
Hopefully I answered that.
Yeah. So, one other question here. If there's, so as people come into recruiting and they have families, sometimes they have a hard time balancing. And you, I know from just working with you these past few months, are all about your family. And so how did you manage to keep that family unit intact and do well and still be as successful as you've been?
And I don't know if we have enough time.
We do. We've got some time.
It's not as easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but it's a priority, and that's where it starts. There's so many things that come into play there. Planning and time management is the first thing out of the gate. Whenever we as recruiters talk about, especially to our recruiters, about planning and time management, we talk about the recruiter. It's all production, school visits, zone canvassing, appointment time, transportation back and forth to Met, all these things that deal with production. We have to plan our family. So every month as an EA recruiter, and I taught this to my recruiters when I was a flight chief, and to this day I have the same belief. I grabbed me from my wife. I grabbed her calendar out of her purse, and I grabbed the school calendar, and those things were on my calendar. And my boss would tell me, and I had a great flight chief, but he would tell me, "You don't have to put this stuff on your calendar." And I said, "Oh no, I do, because I'm not going to forget this stuff." My family is the most important thing in my life. I love the Air Force. I bleed blue. I have no regrets on being in the Air Force for almost 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
However, all the stuff that the Air Force has provided for me and my family will never replace my family. If I retire, or any of our leaders retire, and they've lost their family in the midst, we'll have all kinds of great, beautiful awards and things like that to look at. But what's it mean if we've lost our family in the process? So the first thing I would say is planning and time management. It's not easy. You have to plan those things. You have to know what things that you can miss and what things you cannot miss. I did not miss unplanned. I did not miss my boys' football games, baseball games, parent-teacher conferences. Never missed an anniversary. Never missed a birthday, because it was on my plan. It was on my plan to do. And those are things you shouldn't adjust. You have to sell your folks. You have to sell. You have to build that rapport with your applicants. And yes, there is a mission, but you have to keep that pendulum swinging back and forth. There will be time for the mission where the mission takes priority, but there also, to follow that, needs to be time where the family takes priority. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of failing in that area. But for me, it's never been an option. I joined, you tried to get me to date myself a minute ago, but I joined during a time where it was a joke. But was it a joke? Where I heard things like, if the Air Force wanted you to have a family, they would have issued you one. And as a young airman, I came in with no stripes, airman basic. I'm going to listen to that, but I also knew I had a brand new baby boy at home. And that, my family is the most important thing to me in my life. And it will always be that way. And they love the Air Force too. I got 2 sons in the Air Force, so need to expand more.
Sure. Does anyone, if any of you have any questions, I haven't seen any pop up, but go ahead and type it in there in the comments, and we'll answer your questions as well. Okay, go ahead. Anything else you'd like to add?
Family.
Or to anything that we've discussed?
I think it all blends together when we talk about leadership and taking care of our people, taking care of our families. We have to, as leaders, get away from this, I've arrived. Because we do see that quite, and you know what, it's easy to do. You get a flight chief job, and you get there, and you got that flight chief job for a reason. But sometimes we feel like we've arrived. And we forget that we have a group of staffs and techs, every once in a while a master sergeant, that their career depends on us. And then as you continue to move up that ladder to senior and chief, a lot of people's careers and families depend on you. And we have to treat them right. We have to treat them right. And we have to do the right things. We have to go to the field. We have to remember the enlisted force structure. We are in this position, whatever position you're in, because of your rank. Mm-hmm. The Air Force has given you that rank, You've earned that rank, and the Air Force has rewarded you with that rank. With that rank comes certain responsibilities. None of us have arrived. I haven't arrived, and I'll still feel that way at my retirement. There's more that we can give to our airmen, and sometimes it's accountability type things. Like I said before, there is a line where you can hold people accountable if you're setting the right expectations, and still love them. We have not arrived. We have to remember that we have to build a team, because let's face it, the staffs and techs today will be the masters, seniors, and chiefs tomorrow. They are the future of the Air Force. And if we truly love the Air Force and we truly believe in what we're doing, which I do, and I would like to say 100% of the people in leadership positions in our command do, we have to grow them to be that. So.
Well, we do have a couple questions.
Okay.
So what advice would you give a rookie recruiter to balance, you just answered that, to balance production and personal life. Let's talk about, what about if they don't have a family? Because a lot of times,
Absolutely.
As a person who doesn't have children or a spouse, like I've noticed, we focus on that a lot, and sometimes the people who don't have that get left out of the conversation.
Yeah, whenever I really do a briefing and I talk about family a lot, because that's what I have. But you do have folks that maybe they're not married, maybe they're on the market. I don't know. Maybe they're not interested in that. Maybe they have dogs. Maybe they have cats. Maybe they're. I'll give you one example. One of my recruiters, when I was a flight chief, he wasn't married. He had 2 dogs, and he loved to game. He was a gamer. I would have never known that had I not got to know him and spent time with him. And that's what motivated him. To get him out of the office. I had a guy with a boat at the time. At the time, he wasn't married. He had a boat. He wanted to be on his boat all the time. And I made sure he was on his boat quite a bit. I'm not gonna tell everybody who I gave days off and who I didn't. But we had a very good team when I was a flight chief, and they worked their behinds off, and I rewarded them for it. But it was time management from Monday through Thursday, knowing that there's going to be long days, but for every long day, we're going to have a short day. Controlling your environment and controlling the things that are within your control as a flight chief. But for a rookie recruiter, to kind of go back to that, back up. We have to get to know our people. Everybody's not married. Everybody's not on the market. There are people that we have that are in our business that are quality NCOs that we need to be able to relate to. And just because my story isn't their story, we have to get to know our people, and we have to know what motivates them. We have to be able to seek change in their attitudes and behaviors. We talked about suicide and things like that. We have to know our people. That's the bottom line. Now, as far as a rookie, ask that question again, because I wanted to.
So what advice would you give a rookie recruiter to balance production and personal life?
Planning and time management. If you don't know how to do it properly, you need to raise your hand and ask. The most important thing in this business is planning and time management. Not just having that plan, but actually working that plan in the schoolhouse. This is going to sound familiar to everybody. I have this day at this time or this day at this time. What works best for you? You should actually be looking at your plan and knowing what times you have. Don't schedule an appointment on your wife's birthday or your husband's birthday or your kid's ballet recital. Schedule around it. Planning and time management will be the key factor, the most important factor to balancing your family and your production.
Okay.
It's easier said than done.
Yeah. All right. So along those lines, what are some ways to get the recruiter spouses involved in? I'm guessing this means in their job, maybe in the flight or at work.
So as a leader, first part of that is knowing the wife's name or the spouse's
Right.
name. I know when I talk to my recruiters, it seemed like it meant more to be able to say, how's Michelle, rather than how's your wife.
Right.
It's more personal. So again, getting to know your people. I'll go back to when I was a recruiter, and my flight chief basically told me, kind of what I preach today. Don't do anything illegal and moral unethical. Think outside the box. Keep your wife involved in what you're doing. Keep your kids involved in what you're doing. So what I did as a recruiter, there were times where my wife would go to school with me. She dressed nice, and not that she doesn't dress nice all the time, but she would dress nice with me, and we would go together. And she would be with me, and then we would have lunch that day. If I had an appointment, dep calls. My wife would come in, and she would talk to, while my wife is not military, and she never acts like she's military. She's not overbearing, but sometimes females want to talk to females. Right. So we lived at Lackland before. I'd been in the Air Force a little while, so she would talk to the females about just the base and just in general, what she sees, and that the females in my depth seem to like that. And then spouses, for the married folks that were in the depth, and she would talk to them about how things work and kind of our story. So keeping them involved in what you're doing. Where we run into problems sometimes is the wife or the husband or the significant other doesn't really know what we're doing. Why? I mean, it would be very easy for my wife to sit back at that time, because there were times where I would work late. But I had a great boss, and I knew that I was going to have a short day too. But there would be times where I'd be in the office, especially my first year, 7 or 8 o'clock at night. It would have been very easy for Dawn to be like, what's really going on? There was nothing going on. Right. But I kept her involved. At every turn, I would keep her involved. My kids, during the summer, I had a test room that I set a little TV in, and about once or twice a week, my little guys, they would come in with me. The 2 guys that are in the Air Force now. So when it came time to recruit them, I didn't recruit them. They already knew what was up. So you have to keep your spouse, your significant other, involved in what you're doing. Make it fun. Think outside the box. As long as it's not illegal and moral and ethical, why not? Why not? The community wants. What does the communities think of us when they see us when there's no military presence around? You got to ask yourself those questions. I had no military experience when I joined the Air Force. I just thought it was military. Sometimes they need to see us with our families, right, with our friends.
We're real people.
Yes, they were real people. So.
Part of that community.
Yep.
All right. I think this will be our last question. What are some tools or ways that you've used to develop EA recruiters who are geographically separated hours away from in-base? Did you experience that at all?
Say that again.
So what are some tools that you used or ways you used to develop EA recruiters who are, any recruiters really, this could apply to flight chiefs too, who are geographically separated from a base? Because a lot of times we have the resources like the career advisor putting professional development courses on and things like that.
Okay, so we're talking, okay. So, yes, I've definitely dealt with geographically separated folks, being a pro suit in the 19th and having Europe and then they had a base over there, but recruiters up towards the Canada border there, where there is no military. The first thing I will say is we have to go see them. I'll still go back to that. We have to have a presence with them, but we have to look for ways to give them an opportunity to lead. Whether that's filling in when the flight chief is maybe on leave, giving them an opportunity to move into a MEPS type role or something like that. We have to find ways to keep them motivated and keep them on the right career path. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes you don't have those opportunities. But what I would always go back to is I would search out things that I knew that I could get them involved in, even if it wasn't Air Force related, community. Remember, like when I came in, and even when I joined, I think we talked about the cell phones a day or two ago.
We didn't have those.
Nothing was at my fingertips to look up. That's there now. Chamber of Commerce, just whatever city, community events, and then go out to these places. You gotta look at it from a perspective. It may not produce numbers right away, but you build those relationships within your community, and it turns into a couple of things. Next thing you know, you're involved in event planning for community activities. Meanwhile, on the side, somebody's son or daughter wants to talk about the military, so you combine the two. But you have to seek those out. You cannot sit back and wait for somebody to find them. And as a flight chief, I'm looking for those, but I'm also looking for those for each one of my zones, each one of my airmen that are following me, that are within my flight. Getting them involved in the community. Just because you don't have a base doesn't mean that you can't get involved and do things like that. So it's difficult.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that was all of them. So I just want to thank you all. Thank you, Chief, for taking the time to talk to everyone
Thanks
today.
for having me.
Thank you all for listening, whether you listened while we're live or checked in later on. We do these once a month. So if you have someone, whether it's out in your zone or someone here at headquarters that you think would be a great mentor of the month, just send Chris Higgins an email. He's in charge of putting all this together, so he'll take your ideas as well. And thank you all for listening, and good luck out there.
Thank you.
Have a good day.